Chào các bạn, tên là Alicia, and I'm excited today to respond in this episode of Alicia Learns Vietnamese to some comments that I've gotten on the past 3 videos. So first, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who's subscribed, to everyone who's commented and kind of been part of this community. It sort of feels like, I guess, when you're studying language alone in isolation mostly, it feels very different than when, you're getting a lot of feedback from different people, and I've gotten so many comments that are really interesting and really helpful. So thank you so much for responding to the videos that I've been making. I wanted to take the time to just respond to a couple of those comments and share them with other VLLs because I think some of the information is really valuable and really, really helpful. So I got my little notes here so I can remember all the comments that I wanted to respond to. The first one is actually the most recent, and this was a comment about pronouns. So I mentioned in episode 3, which was Vietnamese is hard, that the pronouns can be really, really overwhelming because all the different situations and relationships and ages that you have to take into account, obviously gender too. And I got a really great recommendation from Sunlight Maggot, I believe is the username, that was to just focus as a beginning Vietnamese language learner on maybe 6 pronouns. So the ones for people who are kind of generally your same age, so like G, An, M, and then people who are older than you, like for an elder, you would use go, and refer to yourself as Chao, and then the opposite for children. So if you kind of just keep those 3 ranges in mind, it feels a little bit more manageable. Obviously, eventually I want to be able to use pronouns really, really well and incorporate all of them into speaking, but it's good to know for now just like a little bit of a shortcut so it doesn't feel so overwhelming and I can kind of just get out there and use them right away without feeling like I just want to say toi and ban all the time because I don't know which pronouns to use. Another one that was a little bit of a correction from my last video, speaking of pronouns, because that's what I was talking about when I used this example, so I said con you mẹ, like I love you mom, and I got a comment saying that you is a little bit more only used for romantic situations. So maybe it's a little bit of an awkward thing to say to your mom. Sorry, mom. And the correct word is tong. I have a little trouble with that diphthong. I don't know if that's the greatest pronunciation, but that's so. This message is from my mom. Take that back and correct the one from last episode. And I've gotten several comments about my pronunciation. I know that's sort of my biggest weakness. Again, like I said, I'm studying in isolation a bit, even though I am here in Vietnam, and I do go out and use my Vietnamese. Probably not as much as I should, but I do use it, on a daily basis, but maybe not at like a deeper conversational level. I just started doing kind of Vietnamese conversation practice with a couple of new conversation partners, so that's been really, really nice and helpful. They help kind of correct the sentences that I've that I've written, and then they are trying to do more conversation with me, but every time someone asks me like a full sentence in Vietnamese, just kind of like spoken at a regular speed, I'm like, oh, I have no idea what you're saying, and I kind of like go into panic mode. So hopefully that's, gonna improve over time. That's something that I definitely need to address. And actually, my next set of videos is going to be focused on pronunciation. So those girls are going to help me make those videos. And hopefully that'll be a really great resource for other VLLs as well. So I got a video response in regards to pronunciation from Jom. And excuse me about my French pronunciation, probably actually worse than my Vietnamese pronunciation. So excuse me for that. But he was talking about the pronunciation of the dot tone. And the way he described it was that the sound needs to be like strangled in your throat. I thought that was like a really great way to describe it. So descriptive, like meh, meh, really, really deep down there. And he gave me a tongue twister that he'd been given to kind of practice that, which is bye, bye, boy, bone. So 7 large grapefruits. I need to practice that one a little bit more, I think, too. I learned a different word for big, so maybe if you can comment below how to spell that. Something like that. That means large. So I can work on my pronunciation of that as well, maybe with my conversation partner. Another comment that I got was about the learning curve in Vietnamese. So I thought this was super interesting. They were saying that when you first start out learning Vietnamese, it's really difficult. Like there's kind of this barrier there or they said it's relatively, difficult. And I think I'm still kind of in that stage where like the listening is really hard, speaking, pronunciation, the writing isn't so bad, but there's a lot of vocabulary. So I'm kind of like at that first hurdle. They're saying kind of once you pass that, then things are really easy. Things get even easier after that. And then that final step where you're kind of transitioning to like academic Vietnamese is where it gets like almost impossible. So I don't know if I'll get that far in my Vietnamese, but I thought that was really interesting. We'll see if I even make it. Hopefully, my goal is kind of to make it past that first hurdle of like that basic level and get to sort of like an intermediate level of Vietnamese. So like in the Common European Framework, maybe like, I think I'm probably still A1, maybe A2-ish, getting close to A2-ish, maybe. And then I'd really like to get to like a B2 level at some point in my Vietnamese. It's sort of kind of what I have in mind at this point anyways. To get to that like C2 level, that academic level, I don't know if I'll ever study necessarily in Vietnam. Who knows what the future will hold, but thought that was an interesting observation about the language in general. And then Quang Khoi, again, excuse me if I'm butchering your name, but I got a really helpful comment from them that gave me all the verb tenses in Vietnamese. So I've mentioned this before, but in everyday spoken Vietnamese, a lot of times the tense itself is just omitted. It's just a word before the verb. So it's not that you actually modify the verb structure, but there's words that indicate the time frame, and you don't actually need those as long as from the context you can imply what time is being talked about. But I thought it was still really important to know those, be aware of them, and then be able to recognize them, because I think there are situations in which you need to emphasize the time frame because maybe no other context clues are available. So thank you so much for that. I'll post it here. I need to spend a little bit more time studying that as well, so I won't try to say them right now because I'm not super familiar with everything. Need to put in a little more study time on that, but I really appreciate it. It was super helpful, and it kind of cleared up for me because I just heard like, yeah, we have tenses, but we don't really use them, so I didn't really know exactly what that meant. So this made it a lot more clear and explicit, so thank you for that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was actually a comment that I got on Facebook. A little discouraging, but I thought it was really interesting as well, and I'll take it on a positive note. But someone said that, no matter how much you study Vietnamese, you're always going to sound like a little bit of an idiot because it's an idiomatic language, which is a term I'd never really heard. I'd never heard an entire language classified as idiomatic. Of course, every language has idiomatic expressions. We have a lot in English, Spanish, et cetera. But to say a whole language is idiomatic feels really overwhelming, right? Like, what are the chances of learning that? I have run into a lot of things, though, I will say, in conversations with friends where they're like, yeah, there's no real like translation for that. It's just like something we add because we do. It sounds more natural, or like this expression, like I'll give you some examples because there's no real good way to translate it. So I think there's some truth to that comment. We'll see as I progress, well, I'll talk more, I guess, as I run into that a little bit more. But I thought it was really interesting. I'll keep it on a positive note and say I don't want that to be like a discouraging reason to never learn Vietnamese, because I think even if you don't ever sound like a perfect native speaker, you can still achieve communication. And how interesting to learn a language that's so different. If it is really like that extreme of idiomatic, I think it's a really interesting thing to learn more about. So I'm going to keep studying. Hopefully the next few videos I'll have some great resources to share with you guys. And you keep on studying too. All right. Cảm ơn. Tạm biệt.